So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar from Custom MT, First Steps in Marrying Natural Language Processing to Localization. Today's host is actually not me. Today's host is our charming Kate Gladyo. I'd like to introduce her to you. She started with Custom MT a couple of months ago, and she's already done a significant amount of research into NLP. And so let me probably introduce quickly the subject, why we find it interesting, and then I'll hand it over to Kate, and also the sounds from TDing from people joining will probably subside by the time. Natural language processing is growing really fast. We see companies adopting different solutions left and right, from text mining, speech recognition, synthetic voice, all the small IT things. But we don't see yet a huge uptake in localization. And so our theory is that the localization people can make a play for this, from usual traditional linguistics to digital linguistics, become that person inside the organization who drives these projects and makes a career out of this, right? Because natural language processing in multiple languages never ends. It starts with the first digital project, and then it goes into more languages, more accuracy, more solutions, more use cases. It's a journey. Now, we are seeing as a company, as an organization, our first NLP project, so it's our first steps, but we also see that the localization leaders are getting interested and wooed by the prospect of being in NLP. And that's why we decided to test our theory, test the waters, and run research by talking to the heads of localization in the global brands to find out where they are at in terms of these localization projects. I would ask everyone to mute. Sorry, I'm muting some people. And that is it, right? So we have an exciting prospect of natural language processing in front of us. We have some use cases which are becoming popularized, but it's still in its infancy. It's still not an industry, not a field which is completely covered or controlled by IT departments. So there's potential. How big of a potential, and how to get into this field? These are the questions I think localization leaders should answer. And with this, I think I can conclude my opening part. I hope you're as excited as I am to take the journey in localization. Sorry. Okay, take it from here, and I'll take over the management of the attendees.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Konstantin. Yeah, so this is what we're going to discuss today, what we're going to explore, NLP and localization, where those two overlap, whether there is a huge overlap right now and whether there will be this overlap in the future. And I'd like to present our speakers today. So first of all, we have Peter. Peter is an internationalization product manager at Disney, and before that he was a technical program manager at Uber and also a localization program manager at Google. Peter, can you say just a couple of words about what you're doing right now?
Yeah, of course. At Disney, I'm a part of Disney streaming internationalization, so everything that has to do with internationalizing your favorite Disney Plus app into different languages for different countries over the world. We just launched in Eastern, Southern Europe, I think 2 weeks ago. Nice. So we're keeping busy. We're in over 100 countries right now, almost 30 languages. So that's what's keeping me busy here these days. And just a quick disclaimer I have to do by like corporate rules that I do not officially represent Disney here or any of my previous employers, to be free of all the legal burdens. So this is not Disney speaking. This is just my personal opinion here.
Okay, thanks for the for saying all of that.
For disclaimer, for the disclaimer.
For disclaimer, yes. Okay, next speaker we have, well, Peter will talk about, let's say, his perspective from the localization perspective. And we also got Jivanti from World Trade Organization. She is the full name, so that I don't make a mistake. That's a technical program, that's documents and translation technology specialist at WTO. And Jivanti will actually share some insights into this overlap of NLP and localization, because that's what she's working with. Jivanti, if you have if you don't have any problems with connection right now, do you want to say anything?
You can hear me, right, Kate?
Yes.
Thank you so much. And first of all, thanks for this opportunity. And I'm so sorry I can't switch on my video because everything is dark around me and you won't see my face. We have a scheduled power cut, and I'm so lucky to be there. So I'm Jivanti. I work at the WTO, the World Trade Organization in Geneva, as a technical specialist, in computational linguistics at the Languages and Document Management Division. And I do basically work, previously I worked at the WIPO in the Patent Intellectual Property Organization, and it's the same, more or less the same. It's a translation technologist. So currently I'm assisting the language technology section in the organization, which assists the translators, revisers, and the other secretariats. So I hope to talk about how we work with localization, how we mix NLP and localization. Thanks.
Perfect, thanks. Finally, our third speaker is Vishal Anand. He is an applied scientist at Microsoft, and also recently he joined the committee on machine translation for EMNLP 2022. And you probably heard of this. It's the biggest, basically, event for in the NLP industry. And Vishal, do you want to say just a couple of words about yourself?
Thank you, Kate. This is Vishal here. I work as an applied scientist at Microsoft, like Kate introduced me as. I have a dual role at Microsoft wherein I do, and I also work on products. So it's a mixed bag. And I work in the Office 365 organization wherein we have a lot of customer data, as in how they interact with the agents and get their problems resolved. So we have access to a lot of data, and I'll add that I also am here on my personal, I'll be sharing my personal opinion and not necessarily representing Microsoft. And I also work with collaborators at Columbia University, where I graduated from 3 years back. So I'm quite excited to share my learnings and take part in the discussion.
Okay, great. So that was the intro for our speakers, and just a couple of words about myself. My name is Kate, and like Konstantin mentioned, I joined CustomMT quite recently, just several months ago, and there I work as an IUX solution designer. So basically, I am exploring how companies can leverage NLP to improve the international user experience of their products or services. And NLP is a very broad field, and there is a lot to discover, actually, and it's on the one hand super fun and also super challenging. And basically 2 months ago, I started this research into the place of NLP in the localization industry, and I was talking to 15 localization experts. So these were like directors of localization at different companies as big as, for example, IKEA, Pearson, Binance, Canva. So as you can imagine, all these companies are in different industries. And my main focus of this research was to see whether there are any NLP use cases as of now in localization, and basically what the current state of the industry is. And over time, over this research, I discovered that right now, localization is still very early in this whole AI journey, and there aren't that many, let's say, use cases. There is, here you can see this chart basically of, let's say, some potential NLP use cases, which could be interesting for localization leaders, localization directors, and the way the way they're represented is that if they're widely used, they're green. Yellow is very few use cases, and red basically means there are no use cases at all. And you know, obviously, neural machine translation is #1 use case of NLP in localization. And because when you think of NLP in localization, MT is the first thing that comes to mind. But there are also such use cases as, for example, multilingual chatbots. For example, when I was talking to Canva, Canva localization leaders, for example, Michael Livo, he mentioned that this is something that they're doing. Their company is something that they're exploring, and they're not the only ones. Basically, some companies, although there are very few, also explore how they can make conversational AI more multilingual, and localization experts could really be the ones working with that. And when it comes to other use cases, such as multilingual content generation, which is really like it's growing super rapidly, just content generation in general, or like product perception monitoring, these NLP use cases are really not present yet in localization, and basically there is still a lot to explore. And basically, I would say the main takeaways from this research that I was doing could be really summarized on this slide. So although localization experts admit that they're still not there when it comes to AI innovation or NLP, they're really interested in the topic, and they want to explore this field. And there are many opportunities to explore. Like I said, multilingual search, chatbots, market intelligence, and all of that. And although the industry, I would say, compared to others, is quite behind in this topic, there are companies that are leading the trend. Like I said, I already mentioned Canva, what they're doing with MT for support tickets and building a multilingual chatbot. So yeah, some companies are, you know, a bit ahead in this game. And speaking of NLP implementation within companies, what I also noticed is that very few have, you know, a centralized NLP unit. It's the most common scenario is when you have several teams within a company, for example, a search team or a customer support team, and all of those teams are implementing some kind of NLP solution. So that means that localization, if there is no NLP or ML unit in your company, as a localization project manager or localization director, you could also explore the field and also see if there is any use case you could take on as a localization leader. And these were my takeaways from the research, but now I'm kind of giving the floor to Peter, and I think he will share more about localization, basically what the industry looks like right now, and also he will mention some NLP use cases he saw or didn't see in his work. So Peter, you're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That was a fairly good summary, and I apologize in advance. I don't have any slides. I recently got out of COVID, so I kind of missed out on all that.
It's really
didn't get the chance to prepare the slides, but yeah, my background is primarily in enterprise tech localization, so it provides certain limitations. So I'm not with huge legal libraries or biotech case studies and stuff like that. So it's primarily product localization. And from what I've seen in both the companies I've worked for and by talking to people in the industry, there's not a tremendous amount of space for NLP and localization, because usually when you're not talking about companies like Google or Microsoft, localization is a very operational function in the company. So we are tasked with localizing whatever is given to us in the best possible way. So innovation is usually process focused to a very large extent. And there's very limited space where we can innovate. Of course, we can build better processes, and that's what we tend to focus on most of the time, because even a smaller process improvement can give us a big gain in terms of speed or cost. But innovation in the NLP space has usually been limited. And also because we are primarily working with the tools that are provided to us either by our language vendors or by technology vendors, the TMS vendors primarily. So whenever those people, those companies use NLP, we use it to a certain extent. So that's whatever is packaged for us in the TMS, we use it. And hardcore process innovation using the TMS and working with has more upside than working on incremental things that NLP can potentially bring. So NLP, from what I've seen, NLP is an option for very mature localization orgs. Basically, when you've exhausted all ways of improving your when your process is basically perfect, and a smaller gain got from implementing some hardcore NLP tech can give you a small incremental improvement that's valuable. So very mature orgs are benefiting from it.
Can you think of an example of like a mature localization?
I don't want to give names of.
All right.
My companies, the companies that I've worked with, or companies that I
like
know
top
about.
5 big tech or
but,
something.
One project that I was working with as a mentor for recently was dealing with optimizing source content. So if you look at the localization, you have the black box, the TMS that's doing the heavy lifting together with the vendors, and then you receive the result. So we were looking at the incoming texts, and we asked the question, what can we do to make the incoming texts better, especially given the fact that we are relying heavily on machine translation during our localization phase. So how do we make our incoming texts more suitable for machine translation? And what we figured out in the process is that machine translation level of kind of textual understanding is that of a 8th grade student when you look at the high school. And if we optimize our incoming texts to that, and so if you're familiar with Flash or Flash Kincaid reading ease score, that's very popular readability metric for school texts in America.
Okay.
And it's automatically measured using the number of syllables in a word, number of words in a sentence, stuff like that. So pretty basic NLP, if you will. So we worked with our copywriters, providing them the NLP, basic NLP tooling to give them a chance to optimize their text to the level of 7th to 8th year, 8th grade students. And we learned that if we provide the texts that are sufficiently simple but not too simple, or empty engine, we get a pretty decent gain in terms of quality. So if we spend a little bit of invest in NLP on the inbound texts, we get better machine translation results. Post-editing distance became significantly better for optimized source texts than they were for kind of non-optimized source texts. So that was a pretty interesting result. It was a research project or an experimental project. It never went into production, primarily because it's, when you go back into the process level on the localization side, it's very difficult to go up to your stakeholders and tell them you need to optimize your source texts this way, especially if you cannot provide them the tools. So if there is still a question of tooling here. So if we can provide a tool that would make text optimization easy to achieve, perhaps they would be willing to go for it.
Okay. Also, Peter, you mentioned also that you worked with some NLP use cases at Uber. Can you just quickly go over that?
So that's actually one of the experiments we did at Uber for NLP. I don't think I can mention any other ones. This one has been discussed before. So yeah, here it is. And I actually worked with a group of students last year to productize this. They've built an add-on for copywriters they could use in their work that would basically kind of give them sort of like Grammarly with a twist. When they're writing their text in Google Docs, they get those pop-ups telling them, hey, you can make this sentence more suitable for machine translation if you do this and you do that.
Yeah. Okay. So
that kind of works, but also a couple of extra words about where I've seen NLP and localization. We're kind of forgetting that speech recognition is also considered NLP. So everything dealing with subtitles is NLP, and we do use that a lot all over.
Okay.
And one other interesting thing that is more product related than purely NLP, but some deep fake dubbing videos are also a thing. Too popular because it's, I don't know, it looks bizarre when the talking head speaks another language, but that's...
I'll have to stop you here, although that's what's super interesting, especially because deepfake, that's definitely something that we can really discuss for much longer than just 10 minutes. But I because we have two other speakers and dumb questions. Thanks a lot. That was actually super interesting to hear, especially this NLP use case at Uber that you mentioned, and also the fact that you mentioned that speech recognition is also NLP, and so oftentimes we just forget that it is, but it's much more, it's quite a common use case. And our next speaker actually it's Jivanti, and I would love to give her now the floor, the Zoom floor, to cover more about, let's say, how localization and NLP can overlap and how it did at WTO. Jivanti, do you want me to share these slides? Or
yes, please, Kate. It would be great because I'm struggling a little bit with my situation. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Yeah.
In just a second.
Peter, is your tool available for everyone?
Okay, I think.
Yeah, I can see it. Thank you. I hope others can too. So I basically created a little set of slides just because I was not exactly sure about the entire audience. So I might have put in the first slide like a basic indication of what the keywords are. If you can go to the next slide, Kate. So thanks. So yeah, so I just put this word. And also I have to say that what the projects I mentioned might not be like, I can't specifically say I do these things at here or there, but I will just mention the projects that I do mainly in international organizations. So yeah, so I just go through this slide. It's just to show you that I'm so sorry if I'm repeating something really basic for all the audience.
No, go ahead.
So yeah, so just to show you that we know this concept of artificial intelligence, and within that there are these subcomponents like machine learning and the language processing, and also natural language processing, which is again language processing, and deep learning, which is a subset of machine learning. But yeah, we have this buzzword artificial intelligence, but there are a lot of things that go inside it. So I just wanted to, this was just taken from the internet. So and then the term localization, I just put it so that if anybody needs some explanation, and again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating something,
I think for localization we're good, because most of our audience is people are from localization.
Okay. So yeah, so just I think I can just tell that with AI, because these are the projects that I do with this within my work area, it's mainly with AI, which helps localization. So NLP tasks which use AI like machine learning, and then it helps with localization. So I just put, like, if you see the right side corner, it's I worked with machine translation mainly, and also mainly with speech recognition, and also with spoken language understanding and text classification and things like that. So if you could go please to the next slide. I think these are just use cases that I'm currently, and maybe within the past 5 to 6 years, I've been working on this area. So I just put like a list. So if anybody in the audience have any questions about a specific domain, please feel free to ask questions later. So using natural language processing and using NLP techniques for better localization purposes, one of the major tasks, major projects that we've been doing is training neural machine translation engines with localization support. So we have multiple language pairs in almost all of these international organizations that need language specific customization. So for example, in the current organization and in the previous one, we always make use of ever increasing revised data. And we train more and more new machine translation engines for all language pairs. And then we use organization-based terminology and glossaries for each language pair as well. So I would say that this is a way of customizing the machine translation engines according to the domain as well as for the language pair. So and the other one is training speech to text engines. It's more or less the same idea of training using organization-based data. Sometimes the United Nations and these organizations use the, how do you say, like parallel audios and videos that are common, like there are portals that share data sets. And we train speech to text engines, and there are organization-specific in-house software that has been developed. And we try to train our models using these data sets and this in-house software. So right now for NMT, neural machine translation, and for speech to text, we use in-house stuff, in-house software and in-house data and in-house customization methods. So when it comes to the speech to text models, the models that we have trained captures nicely the accents of speakers from different ethnicities. And same goes to NMT, neural machine translation. We have I would say, like, of course, if we translate using something generic like an NMT engine, the internal organizational NMT systems, of course, performs better for their domain, for the domain and for the language pair, and using the terminology. So to gain that efficiency, we do glossary management, content management systems, and there are terminologists, term-based management, and the term bases are being continuously updated and very meticulously checked, so that for each language pair and for like the localization is being done very carefully, because based on any domain or any language pair, sometimes or more or less all the time, it really helps that these resources exist for translators and for revisers, because for them, they can refer to previously translated or previously curated databases to get the exact or best option for the translation purpose. And then the localization aspect gets better. So yeah, if you could move to the next slide, Kate, thank you. So, and yeah, this is just a continuation of that. And we also do text analysis, like to find out which texts are more important, which keywords need to be extracted, which terminology has to be used in stored in a text, and which texts are more important. And then text summarization, it's not very much done right now. And then of course, multilingual information retrieval, we always use this because within organizations, it's very it's just a basic necessity to have parallel data sets and to use them to improve the performance of whatever we have now. So yeah, so when I speak about all these options, when we do have these resources, for example, let's say we have NLP models, we have glossaries, we have terminology databases. What the translators normally do is the CAT tools, and they use the CAT tools to support the term bases. They allocate different penalties for different glossaries, terminology lists, and keywords. And there are centralized memories which can be prioritized by the translator if they think that that memory is, by memory I mean database, is better than the other. And there are keyword extraction methods which have to be revised, but then they will be added to another, maybe less important database. And yeah, so it's more or less, what I want to say is that, as I say in the last point, the human oversight is still needed, because let's say we do have a lot of glossaries, we do have a lot of term bases. It's the reviser or the translator who knows what to use better when. So it's them who decide, okay, I would prefer to use this memory rather than the other one. So it's not in a level that using NLP for localization purpose is, I don't know, according to my knowledge, I feel that right now we need a mix of both. And so yeah, so I just this is all I wrote in the slides, but please feel free to ask more questions. And apart from this, there have been also spoken language understanding applications that have been used for localization purposes. So for like transport systems, and to understand, let's say when I use it in a user can use this application for finding the nearest restaurant, nearest hotel, or something like that. So I've also worked within that area, but not within the context of international organizations. And the other one is coming from South Asia. I have worked in localization project, which also used this localization aspect a lot, which was named pan localization, which was for least minority languages. So in my country, we do have a couple of languages, English and Tamil, that are not very, let's say, predominant in the world. So we have to have resources or software to facilitate the translation, or to convert the encoding, things like that. So I was lucky to participate in such a project as well, which is now being used in the government organizations to store like English to Sinhalese, like my language is Sinhalese. Yeah, so that would be another interesting localization plus NLP aspect that would come to my mind. So yeah, so that's all. I hope I didn't bombard you with information, but
no, that was actually pretty interesting and super insightful, and yeah, I would say very relevant to what we're trying to explore here. So thanks, Jivanti. I think we'll have time for the questions after all the speakers, share their presentation. But yeah, thanks for the presentation. And now I think I can invite our next one, Vishal, to talk about NLP and some NLP use cases he saw and he would suggest to localization leaders and localization project managers and just directors. So Vishal, do you want me to share the presentation, or are you good? Oh, you're good. Okay, perfect.
Oh, thank you. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Cool. So thanks everyone. So I'll be speaking about NLP and localization in context of applied products. And if somewhere were to be inclined to look into the research, I can also speak over that. So this is a mixed bag of what NLP and localization may have to offer. So I'm an applied scientist at Microsoft with a master's in computer science from Columbia University. I'll be serving in the committee of MT in EMNLP 2022 in Abu Dhabi, end of this year. So I broadly work on multilingual low resource learning. I have some research published on that. I currently at Microsoft work on contextual semantic search and do independent research on multimodal semantic understanding with TrekVid, which is part of NIST, the US government's flagship department, which focuses on research. And at Microsoft, I work on conversational AI and have worked with some ration in the past. With that context, I'll speak over three broad areas that are both exciting from an academic standpoint, and there are easy use cases of what we may achieve in terms of business value. The first thing is multilingual semantic search. So usually we see applications wherein, make a note of the time so that I don't go overboard. So when we look at applications which have to do something with translation, or if someone were to localize to a different context or geography, we directly see the result. However, do we get to interact with the data as well? So this is one of the works I have done in 2020. This is I'm one of the authors here. I'm one of the lead authors. So what we did was we took a bunch of languages which do not have enough data. And I think this is very crucial in terms of localization, wherein, let's say we are trying to deploy to a geography where not enough research has been done, not enough ready-to-use API are available. So we can just use the Bible translations, the religious book Bible, and take from English to another language. And usually they are available, and that is good enough to get really good translations. And we can even search for two different words and languages and see how close they are. And there are existing tools from Facebook, it's fast text. And what I did was multi-seg. They were found to beat fast text in terms of low resource languages. The paper is available, the code is available. In terms of business application, we can directly look for a neighbor localization. So what we do is we look for a certain word that we want to localize to a certain geography and figure out, not just in a certain language, we can do it for a cluster of languages. Could be Indic, Slavic, or any languages you can think of. It could also be a man-made language. So man-made as in, it could be a computer language as well, which people have just created out of thin air as a joke, maybe. So this is multilingual semantic search, very useful for exploration and finding potential fit rather than doing the whole 9 yards and realizing that it's no good. With that as a pretext, I go over to the next one. Now, this is something while I was speaking with Kate as to what I could share to the audience today. I realized that share chat would be remiss if we didn't mention about share chat. So I grew up in India, and WhatsApp was quite famous. It probably still is. Share chat is something that they did for 15 Indian languages. And considering how internet is probably not still available to a large part of the population, in 7 years, from 2015 to 2022, now it has grown to 250 million monthly active users. It is currently valued at $5 billion. It's huge, and it's WhatsApp, but for all languages. So this is a huge inspiration that even if things might seem very mature and stagnant, however, there is always scope for localization from the aspect of localization. And so they have also released actual data sets that they have collected, which is what Peter was saying earlier was about audio. And I'll go a step further. It's also multimodal. We could also take in videos, things like TikTok, and they have something called MOJ, which is a proxy for TikTok, but in localization. That has grown really huge in India as well. And this is the paper which just got published in CVPR, I think last week in New Orleans. 100,000 videos in 11 languages. So massive area to explore. So anything that is popular in a certain language can easily be expanded to other languages. And there's a lot of money to be made, a lot of problems to be solved. So ShareChat is an inspiration that I can share to the audience today. I'll go a step further. How about we look at, I don't know if everyone is aware of it, but different generations speak slightly differently. Someone who's from the 1970s will speak differently than someone who's 1990s, and similar for 2010. I know there was a research done in 1989 wherein they introduced the word New York. Those were two words in 1989, Pentry Bank. Now they're considered one word. So the new generational lingo might change, and they can be considered new languages. So we could probably take urbandictionary.com, Reddit, music or rap, or even memes, and cater to certain audiences that might be missed out if we were to stick to just general localization and very specific languages. So we can also look into, let's say, the language English. There's the right usage and there's the real usage, which people usually do. It may not be the perfect one, but we might miss out on certain key aspects of human emotions. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine last week, and that's when I used this word in English, which means to discover. The person thought I was meaning a disaster, which is pronounced exactly the same. There is zero difference in the pronunciation. So that led me to this concept, which is called code switching, which is an NLP concept, wherein someone who speaks multiple languages can alternate between them without realizing. So that's something else we can focus on in terms of localization. And of course, there are a lot of research that are there that are accessible, and the codes might or might not be available on the GitHub or GitLab. However, I think looking from the perspective of product will be really wonderful, because we can look for the problems to solve and then find the corresponding mapping. And there are lots of interesting areas to explore. So please let me know if you want to discuss further on any of these, and I'll be happy to take questions. And thanks, Kate, for inviting me to take part in this.
Sure, thanks for the presentation, Vishal. I think now we have some time left for the questions. Konstantin, can you tell me if there are any? I think there's something on the chat already. Should we do the chat first and then?
Let's ask for the first our own question. And ladies and gentlemen in the room, you are now welcome to post your questions. Let's go with the first question from our side and see if anyone wants to maybe raise their hand and ask the question on microphone.
Sure. Yeah. So here is a question that we had on our end for I think for all of our speakers, but maybe if one of you guys have already an answer you want to answer, that you're very welcome. And the question we had is basically, let me see. It's how, the name of our webinar is First Steps of NLP and Localization. So which first steps you think localization directors and localization, PMs can take to kind of enter this NLP game? How can they start already exploring this field? So maybe like Peter or Jivanti, I think you guys could be more suitable to answer the question.
I would say that, and I'll mention that I kind of overlooked the elephant in the room when I was talking about NLP, that machine translation is definitely NLP, and I'm not even mentioning it as a part of NLP because it's a mandatory part of every localization company's toolkit. And I think machine translation is a very good way to get into the whole kind of NLP thing, because this is the most advanced technology. This is the technology that can give you the best, the most immediate benefit, and it's, I mean, everybody's using it, so you don't really need to convince anyone to use it anymore.
It's no longer something new and shiny. Machine translation is becoming widely used. So does it really give us the entry to the ML game? Does it really teach us about all the use cases? What would a person in your shoes do to learn about all the other opportunities and possibilities?
I guess I would, as Kate mentioned, NLP is usually kind of non-machine translation, is usually isolated within other teams within the company. Yeah. And it's definitely the case that I've seen to both Disney and Uber and a lot of the folks that I've talked to. You have your English NLP people doing chatbots and stuff like that. So it's the easiest way is if you go to them and say, hey, we have machine translation that is custom trained for our company. It knows our terminology. It knows how we operate. We have our own set of engines that is way better than Google. Why don't you start using our engines for your chatbots or whatever NLP tech that you're building? And depending on the use cases your company has. And this way you kind of get your foot in the door with English or like source language NLP, and you go from there. And it's something that I guess Unbabel is doing a lot with support stuff, chatbots, automated support chats, stuff like that. That is fairly advanced, and it is based on machine translation, but it's more than that. If you look at this from the NLP standpoint.
I think Jivanti had a different perspective. Jivanti, would you like to take the lead?
Yes, thanks, Konstantin. And I agree with Peter. Machine translation would be a good start, but it reminded you. This question also reminded me of for some person to get into the field of localization, I think it depends on what they're doing. So, for example, I remember my first project with the pan localization was a place where you can store the information in my native language so that other people can use this database of information. So, for us, because Sinhalese is such a low resource language, the localization project that we had to do was to collect some newspaper articles, like by some I meant quite a lot, and then to create like a little database, then to create a little interface to just be able to act like a translation memory. And then of course there came the problems of Unicode support. And so this question reminded me of how I started getting interested in localization. So I had a feeling that for example, for the government organizations, we didn't have it here in my country. So it helped the community as well as it was a simple task. So I have a feeling that this, like Peter said, like based on the use case, you can think of what to do. That's all that I wanted to say.
So you went into this by solving engineering challenges which were coming your way, and then you expanded your expertise.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. I would like to ask a question to Vishal, and this is about NLP in video games. We have this question from Mr. Zdanov in the chat. What's your opinion on creative translation with the help of NLP technologies? Quests, dialogues in the game are creative, and they're probably a challenge for the direct translation. Do you see any other NLP technologies which can play into this creative content? Maybe this is already from me. Maybe something in text generation. Can text generation create creative dialogue?
So this is lovely. So thank you for this wonderful question. So we have something called T5, which is from Google, which is text to text. I forget the full form, but it's T5. It's a really amazing model. And we have GPT-3, which is by OpenAI and licensed through Microsoft now. And so there are new models which are coming from the text generative space, which can lead to creative translations. However, the interesting part is when you mention in video games, that's wonderful because we don't have to, unlike regular models, directly use it out of the box. We can give it probably 100 examples. I know this because I worked on a hackathon project internal to Microsoft using T5, where we just gave them 100 samples and then it was fine-tuned on it. So everything was focused on those specific examples. So as long as, let's say, we have a Discord chat or something, when someone plays video games, we can train it on that specific module and use that as either self-serving data that gets eventually overtrained. However, this can lead into trouble if we don't regulate how the training is going on. Alternatively, we could do hand tuning, which is will literally make 100 or 200 examples of them, and the model will be considering them as a gold example and generate.
So you can take the D5, take 200 examples, train this model, and attempt a creative translation, fine-tune it, and it might work for video games.
It will work. The results
sure?
are phenomenal.
You're sure? Sure.
I have done this, and this is phenomenal. I think the challenge comes in the fact that if you're in production systems, you cannot afford to be wrong even at 1% of the cases because your company might just go under. So that's where the carefulness aspect comes in, and you have to be really sure of what the generation is going out, because you cannot utter things that can trigger people. I think that's the harder part, but it will perform really well if you're doing things on experimental basis, and the results will be phenomenal. They usually beat benchmarks, but that's where the biggest problem for product is. It works, but are you confident? That's the challenge.
All right, well, I'm excited to try it out. Thank you, Vishal. We have 2 questions to Peter. Peter, you're up, be ready. So the first question is Manuela from IILT group. What is the consequence of having to downgrade the source text to the 7th grade speaker in order to improve the MT results? Did you see what was the impact on the communications in the company? Did you measure it in some way?
We did not explicitly measure it. We measured it in a kind of subjective way. The copywriters who are doing this, they know the company tones, and they've been doing this before without sort of explicitly downgrading it. But what we've been continuously told is that it not only makes it easier for machine translation engines to understand, it also makes it more comprehensible for general humans. So we're not working, and I'm talking about like support pages or maybe product description pages on websites, stuff like that, not scientific articles or anything of that kind. So it actually is an exercise in good style and in good writing to make your texts to that level. It's not overly complex, so do not think that we're trying to make those sentences like I go to school, I'm 3 years old. I'm kind of not simple sentences. Those can be pretty elaborate sentences. They're just not the type of sentences you would meet in dissertations or things like that. So
if I summarize, some sentences worked better, some worked worse. You didn't measure, but you kind of trusted the opinions of your expert users, and they were quite confident with the outcome.
Yeah, we did not do this automatically. It was still a human driven process. But yeah, the impression of the copywriters themselves was that after this exercise, their texts became better.
Excellent, Peter. So quick follow-up question to you. Everyone's excited about the thing which you productized with a group of students. Is it available? Can we download it and play with it? Is there documentation?
Yeah, I'll have to check that because they were planning to build a company out of this, but since they're students, they're
that's
kind of
that's quite something.
Kind of unpredictable. And last time I checked with them, they decided to give it up and open source it. So I'll have to.
So Ala, you probably want to reach out to Peter with your email and be a better user of that application that Peter has built. Let's go on. And we have a couple more questions.
We have a question on data annotation.
Yes, so this is from Angelo. Angelo wants to know if TMX is enough for engine training in NLP, or is there space for translation companies or LSPs, language services providers, to work with localization leaders on the buy side to offer them data annotation services? I think I can take this, and we regularly see this type of request. There's always some annotation services and data labeling and evaluation services required when a machine learning project is on. So Angelo, the answer for you is yes. If you have the expertise and if you talk to the right people, this is definitely something which is creating a market. What is the size of that market is difficult to say, and no one has ever measured this in money. All right, we have more questions. No, it's thank yous from Angelo and from Manuela. So the last question is from Rodrigo. Kate, I think we have.
Or Christina, I think it's.
No, it's Rodrigo. Christina is his last name.
Sorry, I'm really sorry.
Rodrigo, would you like to ask that question on a microphone? Why don't you go ahead and show us? All right, so Rodrigo is not coming on. Let's just read it out.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, sorry. I got here on time. Yeah, so a few years ago, I'll tell you what the background of this question is. Sorry, hi everyone. So a few years ago, I heard about something called segment scrapping. This was like, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years ago. And it was presented to me as kind of part of a research that was being done in the university. Can't remember exactly which one it was. And the idea behind it, the rationale behind it, would be to, well, there were a number of measurements about the time that translators or post editors needed to make the decision about either scrapping the segment, so translating it from scratch, or post edit it. So the idea behind it was to remove that decision from the post editors, therefore increasing vastly their productivity. So my question is there any tool out there that can analyze against whatever the gold standard of quality is, that can analyze that and then basically scrap that segment, delete that segment, removing that decision, or the time that decision takes to be made by the post editor, therefore increasing their productivity?
I think Giovanni has something to say on this question. Giovanni.
Thank you. So I hope I'm answering you, but it's not exactly what you asked, Rodrigo, but if you might know that there are quality estimation applications for the machine translation. So I have participated in a project that did, like on a feature-based analysis. Like you basically train a machine learning model based on text-based features. So to train that model, you need the source text and the target text, and also, of course, the final translation. So like the post-edited text. So you train a supervised classifier. I only trained a supervised classifier. And there are tools like Quest. I think now they have modified the names, but there are other quality estimation training, like models for estimating the quality. So I did this.
OpenKiwi, I think, Giovanni, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you're right.
Model
you're right. Because now, exactly, there are so many other like new neural approaches. When I was doing it, was more or less like statistical. So what we did was to try to define give a quality for the machine translated output. And then if it's, we did some human-based evaluation rounds. And then we decided on a threshold to cut, and then something that is lower than an X amount, we gave it to translate from scratch. So I don't know if it's exactly what you're asking for, but yeah, that's what popped into my mind. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jivanti. So we are running out of time. So Vishal, I see you have the raised hand, so you probably can contribute. And maybe you could wrap it up with the last thing I wanted to cover today is EMNLP, right? It's the largest conference in the world on NLP, and there's a lot to learn from it. Maybe you could answer the question and give us an expose on EMNLP so that we all go there to learn about the new use cases and techniques.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I actually got the paper, which I think Rodrigo is looking for. It's called BERT score. This is from iClear 2020. What it does is, I think it will probably solve the problem you're having at hand, and it's meant for these things, and it's better than the glue score and the blue scores. So this is BERT score. This is probably going to be more like it. And in terms of EMNLP, I think that's the first conference I ever attended. It was in 2019 in Hong Kong. And I think there are 3 top-tier conferences for natural language processing. One is ACL, one is NACL, NAACL. There is EMNLP, and there are also like LREC and other places, but EMNLP is one of the
How many people take part in empirical methods in natural language processing?
From what I remember, last year there were 489 accepted papers, and usually the acceptance rates are from 16% to 24%. So you can 4x that. So probably 2,000.
Thousands of people are there.
2,000 papers are submitted. So at least there are probably, I will say 6,000 authors. So a lot more people attend from industry and academia. And this is phenomenal. This year it will be in Abu Dhabi. So sadly, I won't be able to attend for visa restrictions, but this is phenomenal for someone who can go. I would say any of the 3 conferences, EMNLP, ACL, or NACL, please go ahead. In fact, one of the papers that I authored, the very first slide that I had, the last author was the program chair for ACL, which was held like 2 months back. So pretty amazing. And you'll meet a lot of interesting people, and it's just amazing. So I would just say, go ahead, even if you have no papers.
So there we have it, right? This is, I think, our first foray in NLP in this area. And I hope it was interesting and insightful for the participants. We know that there are use cases. It's still very, very early, but there are things to learn, things to explore together, and places to go. So Vishal, Abu Dhabi this year, right, for NLP.
So.
Yeah, I'd like to also say thanks to all of our speakers and everybody who joined. I think it was a pretty interesting discussion, and hoping to see something more of this in the future.
We'll post the recording on our website, and stay tuned for more updates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Bye.